Alright, listen carefully, because I'm only going to explain this once, and if you don't understand it the first time, that's your problem, not mine. The global oil map is not complicated, but somehow billions of people walking around with smartphones in their pockets still cannot read it, and that is a tragedy of modern education. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. Saudi Arabia is second, Iran third, Canada fourth, Iraq fifth, UAE sixth, Kuwait 7th, United States 8th, Russia 9th. Write that down, memorize it, because everything that is happening in geopolitics right now flows directly from this single geographic reality, and if you cannot see that connection, then you are not paying attention. Now here is where it gets dangerous and beautiful at the same time. The moment the Middle East descends into sustained military conflict, and it is already descending, you lose Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, UAE, and Kuwait from the global oil supply chain simultaneously. Do you understand what that means? That is not a price shock. That is not a recession. That is a civilizational restructuring of who has power and who does not. What remains? North America, Venezuela, Russia. That is your new energy world. That is the new map of power. And anyone still talking about the old order is talking about a corpse. Now let's talk about who needs oil desperately and cannot produce enough of their own. China imports approximately 75% of its total energy needs. 75%. This is the second largest economy on Earth, and it cannot feed its own industrial machine without external supply. India is in a similar position. Japan, South Korea. These are not small countries, these are economic giants, and they are structurally dependent on Middle Eastern oil. The moment that Middle Eastern supply line breaks, and it is breaking right now in real time, these countries have exactly two options. They buy from Russia or they buy from the United States and North America. There is no third option. There is no magical alternative. The pipeline goes through Moscow or it goes through Washington, and that is the entire game. Now here is the part that makes your brain melt if you are actually thinking. Who holds American debt? Who finances the $39 trillion catastrophe that is the United States balance sheet? Japan is the single largest foreign holder of U.S. treasuries. China is second, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, India. Then you have the European bloc, United Kingdom, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Ireland, Switzerland. Look at that list very carefully. Every single major creditor of the United States government is either Asian or European. And what did we just establish? Asian and European economies are structurally dependent on energy imports from the Middle East. So the moment the Middle East collapses as an energy supplier, Asia and Europe are forced into energy dependency on North America. And the moment they are in energy dependency on North America, they cannot afford to dump American treasuries. They cannot afford to abandon the dollar. They cannot afford to pivot to gold or Swiss francs or any alternative monetary system because they need the energy relationship with Washington more than they need monetary independence. The Ponzi scheme continues. The debt continues. The dollar hegemony survives, not because America fixed its finances, not because America became responsible, but because America made itself indispensable through resource control. This is not accidental. This is architecture. This is deliberate geopolitical engineering, and the fact that most people are watching it happen and still calling it chaos means the strategy is working perfectly. Now let me take you to Ukraine, because you cannot understand what is happening in America without first understanding what Russia did and why it worked. The war in Ukraine is not a territorial dispute. Stop saying it is a territorial dispute. It is not about NATO expansion. Stop repeating that talking point. The war in Ukraine is the implementation of a grand civilizational strategy developed decades ago, and the Western media has been so focused on the daily casualty numbers and the drone footage that it completely missed the architecture behind it. Russia is currently restructuring its entire domestic economy around war production. Total industrial output is rising. Military industrial output is rising sharply. Civilian consumer industries are declining. What this tells you is that Russia has made a deliberate decision to become a war economy, not as a temporary emergency measure, but as a permanent structural transformation. Russia is industrializing in the 21st century the same way the Soviet Union industrialized in the 20th century, except this time the product is not steel and tractors. The product is drones, munitions, precision weapons. At the beginning of the conflict, Russia was importing drones from Iran. Then, something remarkable happened. Domestic production exploded. Russian factories started producing their own drone systems at scale, while Iranian imports stayed constant. Russia did not replace the imports. It added domestic production on top of the imports. That is not a country fighting for survival. That is a country building an industrial base for a generational conflict. Now here is the intellectual foundation beneath all of this, and you need to pay attention because this is the most important thing you will hear today. There is a geopolitical framework called the Third Rome Plan. The argument at its core is devastatingly simple. American-led Western civilization is built on secularism, radical individualism, and liberal values. These values atomize communities. They destroy social cohesion. They undermine the bonds of family, religion, and national identity that hold civilizations together over centuries. And because Western civilization is built on these corrosive foundations, it will eventually collapse under its own internal contradictions. The left and the right in America are already at each other's throats. Europe is fracturing. The Middle East is burning. China faces its own demographic and economic catastrophes. All of this was predicted. All of this was anticipated. The analysis said simply this: if you are at the center of the global economic order, you are the most exposed when that order collapses. If you are at the periphery, if you are self-sufficient, if you are coherent and unified, you survive while everyone else burns. Russia's strategy is therefore not to win a conventional war against the West. Russia's strategy is to stay unified through nationalism, through religious identity, through a shared civilizational mission, while the West tears itself apart from the inside. The war in Ukraine serves this purpose perfectly. War unifies. War creates shared sacrifice. War generates nationalism and religious identity in ways that peacetime politics never can. And as Russia fights this grinding attritional war in Ukraine, as it restructures its economy around permanent war production, as it builds alliances with India, Iran, Vietnam, and others who share a multipolar vision, it is constructing a fortress designed to outlast the coming collapse of the global liberal order. Now, America looked at this, and America made a decision. And the decision is brutal in its clarity. If the world is collapsing, if the liberal order is ending, if nothing can save the global system, then the only rational move is to accelerate the collapse in a manner that positions America to emerge dominant on the other side. This is what people are calling the technate, Greater North America as a self-sufficient economic and military fortress. Look at the pattern of aggressive rhetoric and territorial threats over the past year. Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, Honduras, Nicaragua. These are not random provocations from an unstable personality. These are the geographic outlines of a continental economic bloc designed to be completely self-sufficient in energy, food, minerals, and military capacity. This is America building its own fortress to mirror what Russia is constructing. Control Greenland and you control Arctic shipping routes and massive rare earth deposits. Control Canada and you control the second largest oil reserves on Earth, plus freshwater resources that will become the most valuable commodity of the 21st century. Control Mexico and Central America and you control the southern land bridge, plus cheap labor for industrial reshoring. Control Venezuela and you control the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. This is not imperialism for the sake of imperialism. This is resource consolidation in preparation for a world without a functioning global trade order. The genius of this entire strategy, and I use that word with tremendous reluctance, is that it is self-reinforcing. By destabilizing the Middle East, you make Asia and Europe energy dependent on North America. By making Asia and Europe energy dependent on North America, you lock in dollar hegemony because they cannot afford to dump treasuries while they need your oil and gas. By locking in dollar hegemony, you finance the military and industrial buildup needed to consolidate the technate. And by consolidating the technate, you create the self-sufficient fortress that survives the collapse of the global order that you yourself accelerated. It is a closed loop. A self-fulfilling prophecy engineered at civilizational scale. Putin proved the model works in Ukraine. The Russian economy should have collapsed under sanctions. It did not. Russian society should have fractured under military pressure. It did not. The ruble should have become worthless. It stabilized. Because when you control resources, when you control energy, when you build genuine self-sufficiency, economic warfare from the outside has diminishing returns. America studied that lesson. America is now applying that lesson at continental scale. And the rest of the world is still debating whether the man implementing this strategy is intelligent or incompetent, which means the rest of the world is going to be completely blindsided when the architecture becomes impossible to reverse.